Civilized Society.
Listen, I'm here for a public service message to help the people. If you're ever stuck in the ocean and the Jaws is coming for you,
The Jaws.
what you have to do, yes, the Jaws.
Jaws'
What
name
you have
is
to do-
Bruce. Did you know that?
I don't accept that. Sharks don't have names because they have
That's
their own
true.
souls. Okay,
That's
so
true.
what you have to do is you have to face the shark because the shark is your shadow, but the shark is your shadow psychology. Face the shark,
Psychology.
integrate the shark, and then
Yes.
stare into its lifeless eyes and say, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson 3 times. If you say Ralph Waldo Emerson's name 3 times to a shark's face, they turn around and leave.
Because Ralph Waldo Emerson appears in a ghostly form and says, we are all one with nature. And that the shark needs to go do some fucking introspection instead of, running around putting off all his problems on other people, attacking people. Why are you attacking people? Maybe you have something you've got to work out. Maybe the shark has something that he needs to go and work out, And that's what this...
Why is the shark a he?
It was a he. It was.
No one
It was.
knows. It's never said that.
It is known. It is known. His
never
name
explained
is
that.
Bruce.
That
His
could
name
be
is Bruce.
information that is misinformation.
No.
And-
No. I don't think it is because remember, this is from a book.
Neither of us read this book. Let's be
No,
honest.
neither of us have read this book. But when I did my research on this, I have a feeling that we should. Start again.
Mm-mm. No, I think that we're in the ocean.
I feel like we're doing.
I think
the
this
thing
is look.
where
We're in the
just like,
ocean, man.
We're in the ocean.
You don't
but
get
we're
to
not,
start again.
We're
You don't
fucking
get to
it.
start
We're
again.
Treading. We're drowning.
No, we're not. You're in the ocean. You don't get to do a reset. You can't face Jaws and say redo. Jaws doesn't believe in redos. Jaws doesn't believe in redos. Let's give the people what they want right off the bat.
That's what I'm
Or
trying
do
to
you wanna
do. That's what
I'm
I
trying
just.
to give them the word of the podcast.
No, you are
And
not.
You're always trying to block the word of the podcast. Fans
I
know.
put the word of the podcast
Fans
at the
know.
top of the notes, specifically in reverence to your ritual. Okay, whatever.
Okay.
Leave it.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so here's the thing. Jaws, that's how I started the podcast. So here's the thing. Listen,
So
fuckers,
here's
this
the
is what's
thing.
going to happen. Is this podcast, I didn't expect Jaws to be as fucking profound as it is. But here's the thing. The reality is that it's kind of like the quintessential hero's journey movie. It hits every, step of the way in that, like, traditional story. It's very symbolic. You can watch the whole movie and treat everything as a symbol, which is not how every movie is done. You can't actually just reduce every movie down to symbolic figures. It's not. This movie is actually one of the more symbolic movies we've covered so far. Everything can act as a stand-in for something else. Every character, I love that. I love movies that are highly symbolic and really can function. The whole thing can be replaced with different analysis for different issues. And we got a lot of issues that we're going to talk about in respect to Jaws. Toxic masculinity, or so-called toxic masculinity. The depths, going to the depths, the monster, your inner shark, all that. And what's the other thing?
Probably the word of the podcast.
The word of the podcast is, it's a given. You don't have to belabor it. It's gonna happen.
We're
the other
gonna
thing
talk
is corruption.
about. That's right.
That's
Corruption.
right.
That's right. Okay. So.
You want to go ahead and do the damn word of the podcast already?
Yeah, it's amity. 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 Now that means friendly relationships, but it also, in particular, is used for friendly relationships between nations. Now you may say to yourself, why would I pick this word? Well, number one, because Amity is the name of the town. lot of Amity in 70s and 80s horror stuff. Amityville Horror.
That's
was
right. That was
What's
the first
going on
thing I
there?
thought about was that, hey,
Yeah.
I've heard of this before. Did they know? Did they choose? Which one came out later? Do you know?
Well, Amityville Horror was about the ghost of Jaws coming back and haunting a family in a farmhouse. So it was a sequel to Jaws. All right, so the thing is, the main thing we want to talk about
now we
here,
are misinformed. We're fake news.
That's fine. So think about this, land dweller, all you land dwellers out there. You are people of Earth. You are people of the land. Do you understand? That's the nation. You live upon the nation of the land. All of you land dwellers, even if you're sailors. Really, your home is the land. It is not the sea, and it is not the air. And so when I thought of the word amity, thinking about friendly relationships between nations, there is no friendly relationship between the nation of land and the nation of sea. There is not, because inside the sea is Jaws, and Jaws does not want to be your friend. He doesn't want to sign a peace treaty with you. That's just simply how it is. Also, completely on a different subject, but not really, kind of related, I started thinking about UFOs. I was like, why are UFOs? Well, number one, I mean, because unidentified flying objects, so they're flying around the air. The air is another nation, if you think about it. Again, we are land people.
Because I think about this all the
people.
time. When I look at birds and I see, because there's a bunch of hawks around here, and so I watch them all day. I have things to do, but I see them. I just sit around and watch
the
them
hawks
all day. But I see them through all the different windows in the house, and they're just coasting in the air, just floating around. And every now and then they'll make that like really I want to say stereotypical, like such a stereotypical hawk sound, but it's that like sound that they do. It's an eagle sound. Eagles make it too. I guess all whew, boy. That's about it. That's about it. I would like to give them a little more dignity than that one. But whatever, I can't do it. It's an animal sound. They have their own sound, and it's another worldly sound, you know? And
you know what's crazy? You know what sound sharks make?
They don't
You want me to try? Yeah, do you want me to try to do it? The sound?
Yeah, for sure. Whatever.
Yeah, I'll do it. Okay, here. You ready?
I'm ready.
Here goes. Okay.
Donna. That's the sound.
It's a silent sound.
That's
of
right, and
death.
that's pretty fucking
They
scary,
make no
isn't it?
sound. That's right.
That
They
is
make
pretty
no
scary.
sound.
That's pretty scary, actually. Did the shark in the whole movie? I don't think he made any sound. They didn't even like try to kind of boost him up a little bit and have him when he came out on the boat go or anything, like nothing.
Didn't do that. Yeah, apparently in Jaws 2 though, which I saw as a youth in the theater and I was afraid of in the probably 80s. Jaws 2 they did give a sound effect to the shark and like made him sound like a lion, which was not real. There's a lot of shark misinformation in Jaws 1,
Well, again,
and
why?
Jaws 2.
Because we don't know this world. We easily
No, they
accept.
know. They know that everyone knows they don't make lion
Well,
sounds.
they're
just trying to scare the masses.
But they can scare us because sharks are such an alien animal. They're so different from. They're dinosaurs. First of all, they're basically dinosaurs.
No.
Stop
giving
they're
the
very
biological
old.
misinformation.
They're
they are very old, but they're not
old.
dinosaurs.
I know they're not dinosaurs. I hope that people know enough. There are no dinosaurs around. Like, I hope that you guys know it. We're going to get pulled off of YouTube, like, with one of those stupid things on the bottom. Sharks. This may be inaccurate about the existence of dinosaurs. Yeah, they're not dinosaurs. They're just as old as dinosaurs for the most part. Like, they're really fucking old. And that's creepy. It's scary. It's scary that they are so old and they're just hanging around out there in the also extremely old ocean. Because that's the thing. All the animals in the ocean, they came first. All right? Now, I'm not an expert on evolutionary biology and all of that, but I do know that the oceans were here first. And the things were in the ocean first. And those things came out. So the sharks have been, not in their exact form, of course, but sharks and their predecessors have been hanging around in the ancient ocean for the time that we cannot even fathom. They're older than us. And that's already, there's something otherworldly just in that, because they are of another world in the sense that they are of another time. Scary shit.
Proto-shark.
It sounds
That's
like a
even
good
scarier.
metal band name.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So word of the podcast, Amity. I think we've covered that. We understand the friendly relations between nations.
Yes.
That is the name of the town. The
Yes.
name of the town. The name
Yes.
of the town here.
Yes.
And again, just want to make clear this point of you are a landlubber.
Don't insult to listeners.
It's not an insult.
You're
It's
getting
fine.
a little harsh on land dwellers.
I started thinking. I started thinking about like how in the ancient systems of astrology and whatever used to break things down in terms of water, air,
Yeah.
fire,
The elements.
earth. Yeah, and then I think the Asian version has wood in there, which fine. Wood is actually super important. I get it. But so, and then I started to think about how we never see, well, never is a strong word, but we rarely see when we see things. I'm going to start talking about aliens. Should I start talking about aliens, or should we not?
Fuck it, whatever, do it. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just saying. I guess what I was saying is that you always see aliens outside of the land, like they're usually in the air. But then I started to think about, well, do you really? Because I mean, sometimes aliens come down to Earth and they're like, "Come to our ship."
Where are
and
they
land
coming
the
from?
ship.
Yeah, they land, but
the air.
But we
And
don't even.
people, and sometimes there's a lot of recent alien talk about these ships that go in and out of the ocean.
Oh,
Think
is
about
there?
that.
Is there?
There is these particularly these ships that seem to like immediately submerge themselves in the ocean and then disappear into there.
You know,
so
it'd be
are
really
the
cool.
aliens in league with Jaws?
Well,
That
that's
is the
thing.
first.
Well, we got a lot of things that Jaws may be in league with, but we'll get to that. Jaws, God bless him. Jaws is a character. This shark is a stand-in for every form of evil and danger and threat for the human. That's what is, in a way, the shark. I think that's why sharks. They got such a scary reputation after this, because the shark is in this movie the manifestation of all things evil that you can imagine, whether it's your inner demons, the brutality of nature, or just everything, or the bureaucracy that puts people at risk by letting threats accumulate and not protecting the people from them. This shark is everything wrong with life, essentially. So anyway, though, what would be crazy? And I'm not saying this is real, YouTube. I feel like YouTube is like our beloved YouTube, please. I am only posing a question. Do not censor my speech. What if aliens are so advanced that they have already figured out how to live in the lowest parts of the ocean? Because we don't even know all the rest of the ocean. We haven't even explored the totality of the ocean. We can't even go to certain depths of the ocean. Animals can. These old motherfuckers that are living down there, they have no problem hanging out down there. There's no light there. There is no, the pressure is incredibly immense. We cannot exist down there. But these little fish, little shrimp, whatever, and they're like floating around there with lights and all this stuff. Incredible, weird shit down in the bottom of the ocean. And we don't know anything about it. Because these animals I'm talking about are only the ones that we're able to actually see, because we can get that far down enough to see them. And they go a little farther down, but they also come up enough to where we can, where we share a little bit of a zone there. But below, we don't even know. You don't know what's on the bottom of the ocean. Could be aliens, is my point.
I think your point was, what if Jaws stole the election?
You know what?
Was that the point you were trying to make?
Well, honestly, Jaws is the corruption in this film is a main theme. And Jaws is the result of corruption. But we're going to get to that. So we've done your What of the Podcast, Amity, which there's two sides to this. There's the idea of that there is no amity between these two worlds, the world of the land and the world of the sea. But you can also just see this as the known and the unknown. And of course, the more obvious interpretation that we'll get to later on, the conscious and the unconscious, is there's no amity between these things. But there is amity in the film. And it's between the three male characters that go out on the boat. Not at first, But ultimately, the story of these characters is a story of amity between different aspects of masculinity. The first thing I saw when I was watching this movie was like, this is about men. Like, this movie is about men. And it's such a great, no one fucking makes shit like this anymore, because it's like, why is there so many men on the screen? It's like, because they exist. They're like half of the population. And men need to have their own rituals and their own rites of passage and their own spaces, you know? And I think everybody, you know, whatever, everybody should have these spaces. Historically, you would have women had their own spaces, their own rituals, all that shit, and men had theirs too. Then you have the feminist movement, which I like it. I like the first one. I'm not a fan of the current one. I think it squabbles with things that are not real issues. And there's an issue with the late feminism that essentially just wants to be a man. Like, the problem is that there is a difference between men and women, and that's the problem of late feminism. But that's not actually a problem. That's reality. And, you know, it's interesting because, in a way, late feminism just doesn't even appreciate women. Because the whole idea is like, well, women aren't doing these things that men are. So fucking what? Men aren't doing a lot of the things that women do and have done. They're different. It's fine. So this movie is a great return. I mean, it's not a return. It was when it was okay. It was a thing. But this movie is a throwback to a time when you can look at this and say, okay, whatever, toxic masculinity. This is the answer to the so-called problem of toxic masculinity. You have these three different male characters. And what I like about them is that each of them is an excess of one type of the personality of and of masculinity in a way. It's not totally tied in to just men. Like, it's not like you can watch this movie and be like, I can't understand what's going on as a woman. Like, just fucking look at it. Like, this is, you know, it's just the idea of growth and facing challenge. That's not uniquely male, but there are ways that men deal with that process that may be different from women, and that it differs for everyone, your culture, whatever. You know, for people that are so concerned with like, oh, we want diversity, blah, 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 then go do it. Why does everything have to end up being equal and the same for everything if diversity is so important? There should be things that men do, like going fishing. This is one of those like stereotypical traditional men things, like, oh, men, you know, and we make fun of it now, like men hunting and fishing, and it's become, you know, I mean, there's a problem with the culture's view of men now. It's like,
well, I support anyone of any gender who would like to get on a boat and go face a deadly shark. It's fine with me. In fact, you can have my place. You can take my place in the boat. I step aside and allow others to do that. Do you understand? Also, Jaws is the fourth man, apparently, because his name is Bruce, apparently. Don't know if we're going to cut that out of the podcast early. We started to rant a little bit. But, so, you know, then you got Jaws out there as the fourth man.
That's right.
The fourth man shark.
And Jaws
So I was going to go in. I had a little bit that I had in the notes. It was erased by the editor of the notes.
I didn't.
It was called victim. Anything. It was called victim blaming. Oh. And it was where now you know you did erase that. So it was my take. I want to take a controversial take.
Okay.
I'm going to take that take, and here it is. And I don't believe this because I say a lot of things I don't believe, but I argue it anyway. I'm pro Jaws. I just said it. Okay. I am pro Jaws. Let's look at this rationally. Whenever I say that, and anyone who looks like me says that,
it's a problem.
Be prepared to
it's a threat.
Be prepared. Let's look at this rationally. Here's why Jaws is Jaws is the hero of this adventure film, if you really think about it. Okay? So who are his victims? The first victim is a hippie who runs out into the ocean. Recklessly running out into the ocean. Okay? She probably was a Vietnam War protester. She probably dodged the draft in Vietnam. She's out on the beach, dodging the draft from Vietnam,
being
running out there.
That'll always get you killed real early in a horror movie.
That's true. That is a common thing.
It is.
That is a common thing. So Jaws is probably pro-patriarchy. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Not sure. And I'm not endorsing or, saying that's good or bad about Jaws. I'm just pointing out a fact. So he devours the Vietnam Dodge drafting hippie, right? And the other guy who's chasing her, he's too tired to even jump into the ocean, so he definitely didn't go fight in Vietnam.
I forgot about him. He's the other version worthless. Of masculinity. He's like the perfect example of the failed role of young men in a society. He can't even fuck. Like, doesn't he end up like, wasn't he like jerking off on the beach?
No, dude, that's some projection in your mind.
Okay,
that didn't
sorry.
happen. Yeah,
I thought he was
just fell asleep.
He fell asleep, but he was not totally asleep. He was like fantasizing or something.
He's just drunk. He's drunk.
But he wasn't just drunk being like, go and play soccer later. He was saying something. I forget. He was like being like, I think he was fantasizing that he was like with her already or something.
No, I don't know about that. But anyway, look.
But he is totally a failure. Like, she's literally screaming and getting killed, and he's like on the beach, like.
Right. Exactly. So Jaws doesn't even bother with him. He's just like, all right, whatever. You hang out there. Next victim is the small child.
That's right.
What is his name?
Alex.
His
Hintner.
All right.
I liked it because
Would you like?
Yes, I would like. The
Please.
Child's last name, when I read it, I was like, wow, this is almost identical to the German for child, which is Kinder. And even before I even put that together, just the word sounded, I mean, I don't know. I probably just immediately knew that it was child, but the name sounded childish even before I did the conscious conversion of, wait, Kintner, that sounds like kinder, blah, blah. I was just thinking immediately, this sounds like child. It sounds like the archetypal innocent child. And that's important. Right. Well, that's important for this movie because the idea of there's a lot of importance in understanding the role of civilization, because Jaws is a threat to civilization itself.
All right, hold on. I'm not done blaming the victims. You can't talk about the threat to civilization yet. So the second victim is the small child. Now, here's where I come down on this.
Oh.
Number one, why is the mom not watching the child? She's like, go on into the ocean. Everyone knows someone just got eaten by a shark. Even though they pretend like we don't know, they're like, oh, boating accident. But still, I think the community knows, right? So she lets her child run out in the thing on a raft or something. I don't even remember. Actually, you know what? We're missing the dog. The dog got eaten too. Yes. I actually feel bad about the dog. I always feel bad about the animals in horror movies.
They do it on purpose for that.
That I'm not blaming the dog. I blame the dog's owner, which may have been the same guy who was on the beach. Maybe, maybe not. Speculation. No one knows. Small child watches in there. I mean, look, I'm not happy the child got eaten by a shark, but I mean,
what are you doing thrashing around like that, huh?
Yeah,
Alex
exactly.
Kintner, child,
thrashing around there.
You 9 years old. You should know better than to be moving so in such a way as to attract a shark. So there's a lot of victim blaming in this.
Yeah, well, we're not done yet.
Oh, we got
third victim. Third victim is who? See if you can remember.
I do remember. It is that like weird, creepy hippie hanging around, floating in the tide pools where the kids are hanging out. And he comes up and he's like, "What's up? What's up, buddies?" Maybe it's innocent. This was the 70s where not everyone, we didn't assume immediately that everyone is like a Nazi or like a pedophile or something. But
maybe Jaws was just killing a pedophile.
And so you made the brilliant conclusion that actually Jaws is
QAnon.
That's right.
And now I understand why you purged this from the notes, but I can't be stopped, just like Jaws. So here's the thing. The last victim, who is the last victim? There's no other victims besides Quint, right? Quint.
No.
Jaws really doesn't even kill that many people. It's
really
like 4 people. Just let Jaws go, man. I mean, it's a little bit of population control. So look, Quint, I actually like his character.
Yeah.
I feel
Quint is one of the better characters in the films. More sympathetic, just interesting all around.
I feel the kinship. If I had to pick amongst the characters, I probably feel closest to him.
The drunk,
as opposed to the police officer or the rich guy with the tools.
like.
I mean, if I had to
war
pick,
veteran.
that's probably that's the closest. That's the closest one. Okay, so it's hard for me to blame Quint, but here's the thing: you can't drink and work. Like you can't operate heavy machinery while drinking alcohol. That's not
Sorry,
safe.
Quint.
And he did that.
And
right.
Jaws
Also,
is pro establishment and order. Jaws is actually not chaos but order. I'm just kidding. That's
Jaws was
Yeah.
enforcing BUI laws, which is boating under the influence. Which, if you live in Florida, which I do at times, you understand is a major problem and causes
untold
I don't know.
deaths.
Yeah, who knows how many
Probably
deaths from the
5.
sea?
But
Probably a lot. And so Jaws was just, really, when you think about it, think about this.
it's a PSA.
There's a cop. Think about that. It just occurred to me. There's a policeman on the boat. Quint is popping a beer. The policeman should have immediately arrested Quint for boating under the influence, but he lets it go. But you know why? Because he's like, it just shows you how corrupt, the law is. They're just like, okay, go ahead and boat under the influence. And then Jaws is like, no, I enforce law and order. I am going to.
Well, here's the thing.
Punish Quint.
Jaws is actually BLM because Jaws is against the police. And he's clearly trying to he's going far. It's not just defund the police. Jaws says that's for the tiger sharks, okay? What we're doing here is abolishing via devouring the police. Because what was the cop doing? What was Brody doing? Using a firearm in an excessive manner against an animal. I don't think that's allowed as a cop, shooting at animals recklessly on a decrepit boat around civilians? I don't think so. So really, Jaws is pro-BLM and anti-police.
Jaws is whatever you want Jaws to be. I think
and that's
that we
what,
can see that.
yeah. And that could be either a positive aspect of the movie or a flaw, that Jaws is just anything you want it to be.
Is Jaws Antifa? We need to know.
Jaws really, if Jaws was Antifa, he would be the leader of Antifa, because
there are no leaders.
Well,
Anarchy,
not if you don't have,
right?
If you have Jaws, okay? Jaws becomes immediately the leader. And people say that there are no leaders in anarchy. Yeah, there fucking are. They just don't say that. They just lead by force and you just fall in line. Like when they had the autonomous zone in Seattle, yeah, no leaders. Who the fuck was in there telling everybody they couldn't do things and keeping people from getting out and telling journalists they can't get in and like literally enforcing their little fake rules in the autonomous zone? It was Jaws. It was Jaws. And so the thing is, Jaws is against civilization. And this is actually real. Like now we should probably...
Bruce is against civilization, right?
I believe it's...
Are we going to call him Jaws or Bruce?
No, let's call him Juice. Juice.
Juice. Let's call him Juice. Let's call him Juice. Jaws has got the juice.
That's good.
Jaws is drinking energy drinks in the ocean.
Jaws is on the juice.
Just devouring whatever is in his path. I don't know if he is a patriarch. I don't know if he is BLM. I don't know if he is Antifa. I don't think Jaws is a Nazi. I don't think Jaws is a police. I don't think he's anti-police or pro-police. I think Jaws is a very neutral, just like me, just like you. Let's come together, unify.
Jaws is
and
in
be
all
like
of
Jaws.
us. That's right.
Jaws is in all of us.
All right, that's quite enough. Let's go back to
It's never enough.
my rant against feminism. I'm not against feminism. I hate, that there's people that are immediately going to be like, she's an anti-feminist. Like, no. I just don't like the modern iteration of feminism because it's boring. It's angry for no reason. Like, you have to have a real problem and then you have to present real solutions. You can't just attack everything and say that's our platform. That's horrible. I don't want to do that. That's fucking boring and exhausting. So anyway, masculinity, we're going to have a whole section on masculinity in this podcast because I really had no idea how much of a role that played in the film. But what I really like is the idea. Okay, so of course you have these very symbolic parts of the movie. The voyage to face a monster, the rite of passage, and this is, again, both, it can be specifically masculine rite of passage, which is this idea of going fishing with the men and whatever. But everybody has to face rites of passage in their life that, carry you from one section of your life into the other. The weird thing about our society now is that we don't really have these. We have certain ones like graduation or marriage, pregnancy, birth, career things, kind of, but not really. It depends. So we don't really have these very symbolic and defined rites of passage that more traditional and earlier societies definitely had, and they're brutal ones. I mean, there's rites of passage where it's just you have to. I can't remember any specific ones now, but they involve violence against the individual that's undergoing the rite of passage. Like you have to sustain a wound, you have to fight an enemy, you have to bring back some type of trophy from killing an enemy and things like this. So there's some really brutal ones, and the ones that men would face their own rites of passage that were specific for men, because men have their own role in society. They have their own psychology to go through and to develop, and it's different because they face different issues throughout their lives, and so they have their own specific rites of passage. And so there's these ones that kind of crop up in our society where, not that fishing per se is a rite of passage, I would characterize that more as historically a kind of ritual. And you can find these like in society now, like when men create their own little rituals of like, oh, we go to sports games or whatever it is, like whatever stand-ins we use now that are for men to spend time with men. And in a way, this is kind of like the precursor to therapy. That was something I thought that was really interesting in the movie, is that you have these three very different male characters. So you have the Brody, like the main character, who is, to me, this perfect symbol of the average domestic man who's kind of wishy-washy. You know, he's afraid of the water, and he's kind of pulled away from Quint. He kind of, rejects Quint, and he's a little more aligned with Hooper, which Hooper is also an interesting character in that he is really particular. It's a character that comes from wealth. He's young, he's educated, he's arrogant, he's slick. He comes in with like, I brought 2 bottles of wine because I didn't know what you'd be serving. So this is a very important display of culture.
Just a quick note on the characters as you go through. Brody is, you remember, there's a sense that they just left New York City, and this is the mid-'70s. This movie came out in 1975. New York City was, I think most people would agree, a pretty rough place in the mid-'70s. Right. And so he's already he is very much this middle of the road kind of domestic.
Yes.
He's fled the city, tried to take his family away from that. He didn't face it. He didn't stay in New York City and face it. He left, and now he wants kind of a calmer, less, I assume, less stressful, environment or whatever. So he's already, I don't want to say failed, but he's already walked away from a challenge, right?
Exactly. And that's what defines his character as this middle of the road. When I wrote the notes on his character, I ended up calling him like a shore dweller, because that's really a good characterization of the man or the woman that doesn't face the challenges in their life. You stay on the shore. He doesn't go into the depths. He pulls away from that, and he tries to turn back when they first start seeing the shark out in the ocean. He tries to call the Coast Guard and call in, backup. And it's a really great scene because it's that point of no return where you've already committed to going to the deep and to facing the monster. You don't get to turn back and have, society come and collect you out of the danger. And that's his problem.
It was the reasonable thing to do. It actually was the reasonable choice, was to ask for help. And Quint, of course, being Quint, was not reasonable.
No.
It was a totally unreasonable thing to just destroy your own radio and destroy.
Yeah.
That's
Quint,
that's not.
That's specific to Quint's journey also.
Yes.
See, all of these characters, what is super cool about viewing this as like the archetypal hero's journey, but also when I saw these three characters, they're all aspects of the personality in excess. So Brody is an excess of like safety, shore dwelling, careful, the domestic man that doesn't want to make waves kind of thing, that goes with the flow. And it's that actually causes problems in the beginning of the movie for him, because instead of saying, no, this is wrong, we need to close the beaches down and I'm not going to let you do this, he gets pushed along by the bureaucracy, which is essentially stands a stand-in for society that won the mayor. And what happens? Not only does another child die because he didn't stand up to society, to society's corruption, he almost loses his own child. And that's a really great scene, because it shows that not only will you maybe sacrifice the society's, the protection and the safety of society as a whole, but you can also be at risk of your own personal loss by being unable to stand up to corruption.
And it's funny because he makes the shore dwelling safe decision. He actually asks his children to go into the safe pond or whatever, which I don't totally understand. It's an estuary, but I don't understand why that would be safer. I mean, the shark,
they called it the pond or something. So I guess it was like more closed. The idea was that the shark wouldn't go into more shallow water there. But I mean, it was already on the edge of the beach anyway. So. But
I guess the point is, if we're trying to make this this kind of psychological study of this character, he does make the safe choice. He asks his children to go into the safer side, and that won't protect them either.
That's right.
Because Jaws just goes right around there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the idea, is that you can't kind of, and that's a very corrupt thing to do, actually, what he's doing, which is, I know that this is dangerous for everyone else, but I'm going to tell my kids, stay out of the area there, because these other kids, they're going to get fucked up, but not you. I'll protect you with my knowledge, but I won't put myself on the line to protect everyone else. And so that other child he almost loses his child, but the other child does die. And that,
which briefly, and we're not going to go into, viewers are about to get bombarded by Vietnam soon. Bombarded. Operation Linebacker by Vietnam soon, because I've been doing a lot of work on Vietnam history, and we're going to do a lot of Vietnam movies. But it just occurred to me, though, it's this concept of in Vietnam, and honestly in most wars, the people that have connections, the people that are rich, can get their children out of the war. And this came out in 1975. That was the collapse of South Vietnam. The American army was already largely out by 73, but this came out. This would have debuted roughly right around the time South Vietnam collapsed finally and was taken over by North Vietnam. So this idea of like saving your own kids because you have inside information or knowledge of the real what's actually going on.
Yeah.
I was watching all this with that idea of mine of having just read all this Vietnam War history, and so, but that comparison just occurred to me that he tries to save his own kids, which a lot of people did that had connections. They tried to get them out of the draft, get them away from the war.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that is, that's in a way a failure of upholding society and your own civilization. Is I'm gonna get mine and then I'm gonna get out type of thing. But
to be fair, it's a very human thing to do, though, and most people would like. It's hard to blame. It's a problem, but it's also hard to blame someone because the alternative is he could tell his kids, go out into the ocean and take your chances like everyone else by getting eaten by a shark. The solution would have been, no, there's a deadly shark in the ocean. Everyone should not be in the ocean. So you're right. He doesn't stand up to the power structure in the form of the mayor. And then because he doesn't make that first virtuous choice, he's actually then presented with two losing options. Was you throw your kid in the ocean with the rest of the shark bait, or do something underhanded and hide your kid and make him safe, while what's
The
his name?
innocents.
Kyle Kittner or whatever.
No, Alex Kittner.
Alex Kittner, but-
Kittner.
Kittner's already been eaten at this point, right?
No. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
No, he gets
wait.
eaten. He gets eaten. In that scene.
But not during this scene, no, right? Because Jaws the shark eats
You're right. The kid was already
So the
eaten
kid's
before
already
this.
dead. I mean, and so what are
that's
all these
right.
people?
What are
I
they
mean, to some degree,
doing?
what are they? Yeah,
That's
I mean,
the thing. Is
like the first hippie gets eaten, you can make she was drunk and
Yeah,
doing hippie
yeah.
things in the ocean, and
but
it was
the
a boat.
kid,
But I mean, everybody just watched the kid eaten in the ocean with a wave of blood, and
exactly.
but they
They're
killed the
tourists
other
also,
shark.
though.
They killed the other shark and kind of pretended like
right.
it was over and fooled everybody.
So that's also a little bit of the idea of the corruption of a government, a bureaucracy. But yeah, no, I'm not saying that it's so unreasonable for him to want to protect his own child with his inside knowledge. What I really am saying is that that's not going to protect him for long. That's the thing, is that you're still not actually addressing the major problem there. You're only trying to cover your ass, essentially. And so doing that still puts you at risk of the major monster, the major threat. You get what you deserve. That's the thing. It's and the kid's not the one that deserves it. Neither of the kids that got eaten are, it's not that they deserve to eat it, but to get eaten. But the thing is that your decisions, I think some people really, especially now, people really don't have any connection to the idea that your decisions are not just occurring in whatever tiny sphere you make them in. Like if you cheat in your job, you think, okay, well, it'll only stay at my job. No, it's not, because that's indicative of how you're going to live your life. It's this I think there's even like a biblical passage that says something about evil only needs a cracked window or something like that. I don't know where I'm getting that from. I might have written it myself, to be honest, because I know I wrote something like that once. But the idea is that, you need to do something really wrong for your life to become overrun by chaos. And it's not true at all. You just need to do a few things wrong for enough times. And it's like a weird, it's like a disease in a way. So you maybe you injure this finger, but it's not the same in that what's going to happen is you're going to get a bruise over here. And then you're going to have an issue with your foot. And it's the manifestations of bad choices. They don't directly correlate with the choice itself. They end up showing up in different parts of your life. And you're someone that actually taught me about that more, because I would always ask you, should I lie about this when I was younger? And you would say, don't lie about it. Don't lie about it. Just don't. And that was kind of the first way I started to realize that you're supposed to act from an entire system of values, not just on a case-by-case basis. It's not that I choose to lie here and that I choose to cheat only here and that I choose to be a coward here. You have to do it always, because if not, are you really brave? If you're a coward over here, but I'm brave in this scenario, are you really that brave? Or was it easier to do it here? It's a common idea that the test really counts when it's actually hard. It's not if someone gives you a test and they're like, hey, what's 2 + 2? And you do well, great, that was easy. Does that show your knowledge? No. What shows your knowledge or your integrity is when the test is hard. That's when you know that you live up to your own standards. So that's my take.
But you also get caught. That's the thing. I mean, it's that question of, okay, well, should I lie when it's convenient and when it's not? And there are probably times where you should, where you can make a great case for lying. Here's the thing, though. When you do that, then Jaws just comes into the estuary in the back way.
Yes.
And that's kind of the idea of it, is if you can be consistent in what you do and how you act, then number one, you save yourself a lot of energy because you don't have to think all the time.
Yeah, it's not a case-by-case decision.
Right. This is how I live through the world.
Exactly.
for better or for worse, and I don't have to think about it every time. But I don't know.
So going back to these characters, though, so you have the city slicker character, Hooper, which is, there's a good line that Quinn says, which is, "You have money counting hands." I like that. And then you have domestic shore dweller, which is Brody. And I really realized that was his inadequacy in the personality of the character when he was leaving and his wife was like following him, like, don't go, did you take your Dramamine? And then he was like, oh, don't use the cabinet because I haven't fixed the handle yet, and it's all these kind of very domestic concerns and very he in a way is in the estuary himself, and but he's going out to face something and he doesn't even realize. And this is what makes Quinn's character such a like a foreboding figure, is that he's kind of laughing at all of them. He's laughing at Brody's character with this kind of knowing, because he knows that they have no clue what they're going to face yet. You have the younger character that's so arrogant with his education and all his money and his technology, where he's bringing out all this amazing equipment and he's going to do all these things and whatever to study the shark and to get in this cage. And of course, the cage ends up being no match for this shark, which Quint knew immediately. And despite being this kind of rural layman on the outskirts of society compared to a professional sharkographer or whatever it is that he is,
it's sharkologist. Okay.
Is that really what it is?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. I was like, that's pretty crude. But yeah, this is the guy that you say, oh, he's not educated. He's kind of just this fisherman, whatever. And you have the famous whatever marine biologist, whatever he is, he comes with his education, all his technology, and he knows already, oh, this is this. And the character is very defined by this arrogant sense of knowing, and kind of a disdain for the small town and the working class people even.
Correct, but the movie does balance each of these very well, because
they're all
what
flawed.
Is his name?
Hooper.
Marine biologist guy? Hooper is correct about some things. He is the one that comes and says, no, a shark ate the hippie. Yeah. And he is the one that says, and to give him his due, he gets inside the cage. He does show some bravery towards the end, even though it was a bad idea to get inside the cage. So they each redeem themselves a little bit, right? Brody does go out on the ocean, even though that's not what he's well suited for. And that's that's what movies do a lot of times, is they face a character with a challenge that's internal to themselves, that's shown externally. Yeah.
And that's why this movie is such a good example of that, because it's so obvious. Like, it's almost so obvious as to be a little on the nose at times. I mean, you have it's
very traditional filmmaking.
Yeah, it really is. It follows the story, the traditional hero's journey story to a T. And you even have like Brody is afraid of water but gets in the water. It's like this almost so obvious. But so you have Hooper's character. Hooper's character is really interesting to me because he is this. I think he represents a failure in personality that is common in youth. And is common today, because there are many youth, and we have a youth-centric society, and so youth get a lot more say in things than really most societies cared to give. You take
I think I see it. No, I don't take issue with that, but you can also see it as in our current world as this kind of failure of the expert to gain public trust. Because he is an expert and he is a scientist and he knows what he's talking about sharks within the movie, right? But he can't, because of his kind of attitude and his arrogance and the way he acts, he can't actually get that information to people that could use it in a way that they would be able to use and make the situation better. And this has been through American history, this has been a theme of the urban expert, scientific, rational person versus the rural, irrational, kind of emotional person. And these worlds don't if they could actually communicate better, the world would be better. I mean, but so you can see this character as that kind of person who may have information, may have things that could help, but because of the way he presents it, it doesn't help anybody.
That's the interesting thing about these characters, is that they all end up balancing each other. When they finally all come together and you have them in that scene, at first they're at odds, and you have Quint is harsh on Hooper, much harsher than he is with Brody. And it's kind of this test of him, you know, he's testing him because he does know how to be on a boat and do things, but he's green. Just because you know how to tie the knots and you know the names of the shark doesn't mean that you're going to know what to do when the shark's actually there and you're actually in the danger and in the thick of things. And so he's kind of the this wise man figure that's already been there. But his character is so interesting to me because, okay, so you have all these three characters that have their own on their own they're incomplete characters. Brody is incomplete. He lives on the shore. He doesn't face his fears. He seeks out comfort and ease, and as a result of that, he almost loses his own child and causes harm to other people. Then Hooper is arrogant, naive, overly confident and beholden to his passions, because there's one good scene on the boat where the shark finally shows up and he grabs a camera and he's like, I gotta document. He doesn't even realize how truly dangerous it is yet, because he's never been in that situation yet. He's never faced a shark of that magnitude. And so he's, in a way, and this is an old Greek idea, the idea that passion is actually something dangerous and something to be careful and wary of. Now we talk of passion as like a good thing. It's just it's an inherent good. You're passionate. But this is not the way it was always used. Passions were even passions in itself was considered something weaker, because it would be the equivalent of saying the person is beholden to their emotions, you know? And so Hooper is that character. He gets very immature and resentful when Quint, you know, tries to correct him or brings him down a level and reminds him, you know, you're not in control of this ship. You need to do these things as I tell you to do them, because I'm the one in control of the ship. And this goes to something that we spoke about with what movie was that? Where it's important to follow
The Lighthouse.
The Lighthouse. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
More ocean
on
stuff.
The sea. Yeah, you should follow orders, because it can mean now. And again, and I was, as you were saying this, I thought about that. The problem is that Quint isn't entirely responsible with the orders he gives, and he is a little bit arbitrary, and ultimately he's set on his own path of doom, and he kind of brings people down with him, which is unfortunate. You know, he's too
well, Quint is what I noticed in Quint, the first time he started, I think it was when he pushes the boat too far and he essentially breaks the boat. That was a suicide. That was, I think that was a little bit suicidal. And
which is, you know, his right, except for the fact that he's got two other people, so it's not actually his right. The thing is that, look, he's a callback to the old character in Hemingway's The Old Man in the Sea, and more obviously, Captain Ahab from Moby Dick. The idea of this person who's set on hunting this fish.
Well, it's an obsession.
I think it was, and becomes obsessed to his own. I mean, it's very, very clear that that's where he's coming from. You know,
his character is interesting to me because so he wrecks the boat, like it doesn't work anymore, and he pushes it too far, and it seems like he knows what he's doing. It's his boat. He knows. Why would Hooper know better than him what the boat can take? And but he's on his own journey. So each of these characters are on their own journey to integrate a new side of the personality, and they all have that side. When you bring them all together, they make a complete and healthy man. You know, you would have the passion and the knowledge of youth. You would have the conscientiousness and the duty of Brody, and then you have the wisdom and the kind of experience and ability to withstand hardship of Quint. So all of them together complement each other. At first, they're all at each other's throats, and but when they have that scene, which I really like, the scene where they're all in the boat cabin and it's night and they are just kind of talking and they're all kind of drunk and they start singing. Because I thought about it and I was like, you have Quint starts telling what's essentially a war story, and he's I know this kind of moment. You know, there's this kind of moment where someone, you're having a conversation with a friend or someone, and everything's going like a normal conversation, and then they choose to divulge just a little more information that is just a little heavier than the situation was bearing at the moment. And Quint is unveiling a massive trauma. He is a figure. It's a kind of a commentary on the fallout of war, because he's a veteran from World War II who watched his entire crew, out of 1,000, only 300 survived because the boat was wrecked, and they all banded together so that they were facing outward. From my understanding, this is how they did this. Everybody was kind of like locked together and treading water, and there were sharks. And so this way they were all facing in the same direction, and they could try to fight off the shark if it came towards them, but of course they couldn't. So instead what you had was this sitting duck situation where you're just hoping it's not your turn, and you hear every time as one of your crew members gets picked off by the shark. And he describes one of the crew members that he thought was alive, and he tried to wake him up, and then he realized, oh, he's just half of his body was just floating in the ocean. It wasn't, he was dead. It just looked like he was sleeping, but there was no bottom half to him. And so he tells this story, and the other two characters kind of go quiet. And it's this divulging of a traumatic past. And I really like this scene because, in a way, it's a reminder that there has always been therapy before we required people to have certain trainings and gave it certain names and all these things. And it's not that that's all bad or anything, but you know, you can still, there is something very therapeutic about open conversation with friends. And that's why we do that. That's why we have friends, and we need to be able to have these kind of unguarded moments where we exchange stories like that. And you see that he kind of takes off this burden and shares it with them, even though it's not like they're great friends or anything, but it's like the most primitive version of therapy, just conversation between friends, and they're singing songs and they're drunk, and it's such a beautiful scene of social bonding. And you know, I was thinking, do we even do this anymore? Does anyone even just sit with their friends in silence?
Yes, people do. Real people still exist. Not every. Well, they don't sit in silence.
Yeah, they do. There's no radio. There's no TV with sports. There's nothing. It's just conversation.
People do
in
that.
the sea.
People do that. I mean,
yeah, people
it's
do
less
that.
so, I think, because there's always just a lot of distractions around. But I mean, I every party that I ever have with friends when I invite people over, I require complete silent meditation for at least 10 to 15 minutes. And then for us to slowly, tell stories of trauma. That's a party for me.
Yeah.
That's my party.
That's my party.
No, no, it is a great scene, and I think that there's another thing that visually goes on there, which is they've been out in the ocean. The ocean's ever present there, but when you have this very this sense of when they're under the, I don't understand nautical terms because as I've said before, I'm not a man in the sea particularly. I'm no landlubber, but I'm not a man in the sea. But so they're under below deck or whatever. It feels homey and earth-like and solid in there. It's kind of enclosed. It feels you're not, all you see is the sea through the porthole. I think it's called a porthole. Again, don't know the nautical terms. But visually it changes. You're away from the ocean, and now you're back to land in a way under there.
Yeah.
You know? And they're sharing stories. It's a great scene. I mean,
it's a good scene. It's even well framed. There was a part where the way they
the guy
had
does
the
his
characters
monologue
standing.
well.
Yeah. That scene
he
was
pulls that
really
off.
nice. I
don't know that actor. I don't know if he was a famous actor from the 70s. I don't know. But I mean,
He's dead
he
now.
plays that. Well,
I forgot his
Jaws got him. I mean, well, he was fairly old in 75. I mean,
That's
that was
true, yeah.
45. That was 46. Wait, is that right? Was that movie made 46 years ago?
Well, it's 2021 now. So that's already 21 years.
It is. That movie is almost half a century old.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
And to be fair to it, and it was, so that movie was a blockbuster. That was the biggest grossing
made like
movie.
$400 million something dollars out of like $9 million budget.
And you know what? Despite the shark misinformation, the shark doesn't look totally bad for 1975. Like, I mean, and they had a lot of problems, technical problems with the fake shark. And so they actually had to cut a bunch of scenes, which made the movie better probably.
Yeah.
With the shark. But I watched this, I watched this about a year ago, year and a half ago. I don't know why, before we were doing this podcast. And I don't know why, but I did. And then so I rewatched it here recently for this podcast, and it hit me a little bit wrong in some places. But it is I think that it is a movie people should watch if they haven't seen it. It is a classic in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I'm glad I watched it. I definitely, it's just one of those movies that I was like, I do need to watch it eventually, but just not now. And so I'm glad I finally got around to watching it because it really is a classic movie. It just does everything so well, and it tells a classic story. So anyway, let's go back to the masculinity thing so we can move on to the corruption and stuff. So my main points here are that, Quint is actually he's taking on the last battle that you do in your hero's journey, which is a battle against an enemy that you cannot win against. It is only a matter of how you face that monster. And that monster is death. That is his last battle, is how is he going to go out? I realized that at first. I was like, why is this character suicidal? And then it hit me that, this is his journey. That's what he needs to face now, is death. Obviously he's young or whatever, but these are details you leave out. It was the character's time to die, essentially. And there's a beautiful display of fucking honor. Something I feel like my generation and younger just don't know what that is anymore. We have no concept of what it means to have honorable shame, to have integrity. I think it comes from this idea of like, don't shame people. Listen, there are some things you should have shame about, like being a liar, being a cheater, being cruel. You should be ashamed of those things. There's this idea of that like all kind of shame is bad is ridiculous. Shame is crucial for, building a person up in a way that is good and valuable. I mean, what kind of person would you be if you never felt shame for doing something that's beneath you? You should feel shame. Even if I just have a shitty day where I don't get anything done and I eat some garbage and I don't work out, what am I going to tell myself? That's okay. Everything you do is fine. Never feel bad about yourself. Why shouldn't I? I can do better than that. So of course I'm going to feel shame when I fall below what I know I can do. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. Now, there's a line. You don't want to beat yourself up mercilessly when you're, I'm sick and I didn't get enough work done. Well, give yourself some slack. You have to also be reasonable with yourself. And you don't shame people for things that are beyond their control. I'm not going to shame someone for being having a low income or something. Now, I would shame you if you have a low income and you make horrible financial decisions again and again, and you're incredibly irresponsible with your money. Those are choices, and they're beneath you. So you should not feel good about making choices that make you a worse version of yourself. But we have lost the ability to make a distinction between healthy sense of shame and the kind of shame that makes you a worse person, actually. There is a way to use shame that makes you a worse person, but there's also a way to use it that holds you to a standard that makes you a better person. And the character of Quint, he is an embodiment of this kind of honor. He faces death bravely, and of course he still has fear. And when he gets killed by the shark, it's not like he's like, I am ready. No, of course not. He's still in pain. It's actually a horrible scene for a movie that's that old, where the shark looks obviously not that real. I found that scene very gruesome. I mean, what a horrible, hard scene to watch. But he faced his monster. And this was the monster he could not win against. So at least in facing that monster, he didn't go out in a kind of, spineless, cheating way. He faced it honestly, full on, and really he died a dignified death, because he died the death that his friend died. Remember, he said that the friend got bitten in half. That's what happened to him too. So there's a kind of poetic thing there, because I think his character has this, there's definitely an element of the post-war soldier dealing with PTSD and survivor's guilt particularly. So in a way, he's completed by facing the monster that left him, in a way, he was hollowed out by that monster, by having to see his own crew members killed and being unable to help them, because what are you going to do, and then surviving. And so now he's complete in facing that monster and having the same death. But the idea here is that it was his time to die, essentially. Like, you just see this as the facing of death, not like, if only he had done this, he would have gotten out. No, there was no out. The shark was his fate, his mortality, and he faced it head on with courage, not running from it, not scorning it either. It's important here. He respects the shark. He even says at one point, it's incredible, or something like that. Like, the shark is doing some crazy thing, like running, being a monster. And he doesn't say, this piece of shit. He does say that at different points in the, before they get out on the ocean. He's like, this fucking sharks. And he kind of uses shark slurs. He calls them porkers. So obviously there's a contentious relationship with the shark for him, but he does respect the shark enough. He doesn't, that's the problem with Hooper's characters. Hooper's character views them with this kind of, you can also interpret this as, like you said, the hyper-rational character, the character that only thinks with intellect, has not integrated the other parts of his personality, which is the duty to society, kind of understanding the influence that society has upon the individual, because he gets very angry when he realizes that the government, the mayor, lied about the shark attack, which, as he should, but his anger is naive, because it's the kind of anger that a child feels when they're met with a contradiction to their idea of what is supposed to be a utopia. This is actually how society works. People lie, people cheat, people do things wrong. And Brody is on the other side of that, where Brody's kind of so deep within society that he moves with its whims, and he bends under its burden. Whereas Hooper is like outraged that society could be so unethical, which, you know, welcome to the fucking party. And Quint, though, is I forgot what's going on. What was I saying?
You're just going through the different
I
characters.
forgot why I brought up Quint. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, so Quint views the shark as this way that is, he views it both as like a beautiful thing and a terrible thing. You know, he respects its power, but he also has disdain for what a monster it is. And but Hooper doesn't have that yet. Hooper sees it as this beautiful, incredible thing, totally in the intellect. You know, he only views it from the books, you know, from the education aspect of it. He hasn't gotten the real world experience with it yet.
That's right. I think that's exactly what all those characters are. I mean, and just to sum up on him, the story he relates about the USS Indianapolis was a real thing that happened. That really did. That was a ship that was delivering the atomic bomb to an air base off the coast of Japan in order to deliver that atomic bomb. And so you have within that, you know, obviously the people on that ship were delivering a bomb, a weapon of mass destruction. And then this terrible thing happened, which I actually had that several years ago. I wrote a short story that had that incident in it as part of what happened to one of the characters. So I was familiar with that. And also from just reading history, because it's a terrible thing. The thing is that those people were left out in the ocean, I think, for close to a week.
Yeah, that's what he says, is that they didn't even put out a distress signal. No one came for them.
Right. They were there for a long time, and planes had to land on the ocean, from what I understand, had to land on the ocean, and then they would strap people to the wings of the aircraft and then to get them out of there.
That's insane.
I mean, 700 people dead, eaten by sharks. Not all of them, I assume, were eaten by sharks,
course,
and probably drowned or died from exposure or dehydration or whatever. But I mean, it's a terror that's almost unimaginable. Yeah. I mean, if you've ever been, you know, it's almost unimaginable to spend a week in the middle of the ocean of shark-infested waters, watching the day come, the night come, the day come, the night come. It's almost unimaginable. It's
and then
to
watching
deal with that.
Your crew die alongside you is the other element to that. Is that you saw people. If you're around all these people, there's people that would just say, "I can't anymore," and they just stop swimming or whatever.
I think there were people that would have gone insane. I think that some people would have lost their minds in the water. And then, imagine
it must have
being
been a scene of true horror, like
in the middle of the night, in the middle of the ocean, after your ship, by the way, has been destroyed by an enemy vessel.
Yeah,
forget about that. That's already. I mean, that's just the beginning of the terror, and then you're treading water or whatever, and they have life jackets. Well, they do. Remember, he says in the movie, "I'll never wear a life jacket again," because he can't stand the idea of even putting a life jacket on, I guess, because he had to deal with that. And then imagine trying to survive that if the person next to you has lost their mind.
I don't think
that's
people
interesting.
can understand that. I don't.
No, I don't. I think you would have to live through that to understand.
I say that, but it's not that I understand it. There's only in our society, in our world, for the most part, that we live in as people, not our whole world, but our personal worlds. You only get tiny little glimpses of what that's like, and most of us ignore them. We ignore glimpses of horror because they're horror. They're horrific, and we don't want to face the reality that there's a dark, hideous part of life that's always on the edge of our world. I mean, when I'm walking around and I see like homeless people that are very clearly in the throes of a schizophrenic fit, and they're just they just look like they're degrading, and they're screaming at no one in particular, essentially at God in the sky is what you end up, cursing when you're that far in the depths of being plagued by your own demons. And that's it's funny because I was at a coffee shop the other day, and this is kind of just a normal part of living in LA, is someone having a mental breakdown across the street while you're working at a cafe or something. And I remember there was two guys, in the about 4 hours I was there was two separate people that walked by the cafe just screaming at the sky. And what people do in those moments is everybody kind of tightens up. You feel how everyone in the cafe kind of just tightens up just a little bit and quiets. It just becomes just slightly quieter. And it's almost like a funeral procession. There's this really eerie element to what happens when you see someone that is really in a dark place passing along the edges of normal society, because they're not with you. They're not in the same world. They're not in the same society. They're living there, yeah, physically, but they're not part of society. They're on the outside of society, and society is everyone in the coffee shop doing things, whatever, integrated, accepted, following the rules, not screaming at the sky. You can't do that because immediately that's not the rules of society. You put people on edge when you do that. And so everybody kind of tightens up. And I think it's an interesting example of how scared we are of just the slightest hints of how dark life can get. Because that's dark.
It's context. I think, there's a few things about that. Number one, we can, on this podcast, we can rant and there was a Tim Dillon episode recently who is a comedian. I think he's great, and
good.
It was entitled "Scream at the Sky." So there's an appropriate context to "Scream at the Sky." So I can yell and rant about Jaws victim blaming and eating hippies and all that kind of stuff, and it's obviously a comedic episode, right? Now, if I were to walk down the sidewalk screaming about that, it would be a different thing. But and so the other thing is, I think that people get quiet when they see that, not just because they know that there are scenarios in which they too could lose their mind and be that person. Everyone knows, and it is true, that there is a pathway to madness for every human being.
That's the scripture, there by the grace of God go I, which again,
you're doing a lot of scripture quoting this time.
Yeah,
I think making up some stuff too. I think you're just making up some some
real,
Jaws
misinformation. That one's real though, because I love that one, because that's essentially what it means. It's don't be so arrogant, to think that another person's misfortune is beyond you, because everybody is a human being. You are at risk. Jaws isn't. And Jaws is not a schizophrenic. Jaws is not homeless either. So Jaws is not at risk of the same problems that humans are. But we are. If there's it's a problem. It's an arrogance, and it's a defense against dealing with that horror of human life, is that, well, it wouldn't happen to me. Maybe.
It's not just that, though. It's also you go quiet when you see madness around you because you don't want to attract the eye of madness.
Of course.
So you don't want to actually say something that's going to yeah, well, it's exactly that. You don't want to make a sound or a thing because you know that it may attract the attention of that person, who then fixates upon you in their mind, thinking, who knows what connections are going on in their mind, right? There's a danger to it. I mean, I have been about areas of society where, so I think I mentioned this before in a podcast, where I was in a psychology class a long time ago, and we went into a mental institution during college for a psychology class, and we met and talked to people that were imprisoned for crime, but they were in a separate unit because of psychological illness.
Oh, no, I don't think you've mentioned that on the podcast.
Maybe I didn't. But anyway, maybe I didn't. But anyway, well, we don't need to delve into that. But the point is,
drop that?
Well,
What's
I mean,
the relation?
It wasn't like I was only there for a few hours. The relation is, it was just, there is this weird kind of quiet, almost reverent posture people take when they are not insane, and they're amongst those who have been claimed by madness. And you walk carefully And I mean, it wasn't unsafe to be there. There are obviously guards, and these people weren't at. I don't actually know. I mean, I'm sure they weren't immediately dangerous to anybody, or I assume they wouldn't have allowed us to go talk to them. But and I remember a guy who just looked at me. I was walking along, and he just looked at me and said, "I am Jesus Christ." I'm like, okay, that's a pretty common thing to I think get.
We've spoken about that in the last Hereditary podcast, part 2, the hyper religious. Yeah, right. I think that's the one where we speak about there's a certain like psychosis and schizophrenia, and I think a certain version of mania that present with these hyper religious, particularly psychosis is the
Messiah complex.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's exactly what it's called, but it becomes an obsession with religion. But psychosis is the one where people really have this. It occurs commonly where people believe they are either Jesus, God, or Satan, or that they are inside. Those figures are inside them. Really interesting how that. Well, this goes, I mean, if anybody's interested in this idea of like how demons plague you both metaphorically and literally, you got to watch the part 2 Hereditary, because we go into all of that with that. So I'm not even going to bother going into it, because we'll just end up doing the podcast again.
Yeah, we've sidetracked. I
really like that idea though, about the idea how people take this reverential stance around a person that's clearly in the depths of suffering or madness. Particularly, it's when you know that someone is not rational, and that comes back a little bit to the shark, because this idea that you cannot reason with that figure, because when you have someone that's walking down the street and they're screaming at no one, they're unpredictable and they are immune to reason. You just kind of.
But that's not what Jaws is. I reject I'm defending Jaws again. I reject the idea of Jaws is not a person experiencing mental illness on a sidewalk in L.A.
No, but Jaws is unreasonable.
No, but Jaws is the ultimate reason. Jaws is reason. The problem is it is a clash between civilizations of land and sea. That is the ultimate there is no look. Jaws doesn't listen to me. Jaws does not circle around the ocean wondering what color socks to put on. Jaws does not circle around the ocean wondering if he's fat. Jaws does not wander around the ocean thinking, I don't know, should I go to college, or should I whatever. Jaws doesn't do that. Jaws is the ultimate.
Jaws is instinct. That's why. Accept it. You know it's right.
I call it. Well, then I call instinct the ultimate reason. Capital U, capital R, ultimate reason. That's what I call it.
It's because of reason that we can say, should I or should I? Should I not?
But Jaws has no need for reason.
That's why Jaws is not reasonable.
You can reason. No, you can reason with instinct, and they do. They fight and kill Jaws.
That's not reasoning.
Listen,
that's literally not reasoning.
No, that is. If you are confronted by Jaws, okay, I made a joke. I don't know if I did it already on this podcast or not, but the idea was I'd jump into the ocean and I would reason with Jaws and try to be like, hey, why don't you just stop doing this? This is not a good. I don't think I actually did this on the podcast, but
no,
that's obviously absurd because you don't reason with Jaws.
Exactly.
What you do is you get out of Jaws. The reasonable approach to Jaws is get out of the fucking water, or blow up Jaws with dynamite. That's the only two choices, and it's not the fault of Jaws, and it's not the fault of you. That is the choice. There is no talk to Jaws. I guess the middle ground would be get out of the water until Jaws leaves. I consider that the ultimate reason, though. I understand that Jaws is instinct and Jaws is a shark, and we're talking around the same thing. I'm saying that Jaws doesn't do reason because Jaws has no need for reason.
Well, this is why I think that, so when we did
the ultimate reason, kind of doesn't make sense. Maybe I'm wrong.
Let it go. Just accept the verbiage I'm giving you so we can have the same point, because we're making the same point in different verbiage. When we did the Grizzly Man podcast, which if you would like to watch that podcast, you will have to sign up to the Patreon, and it's a good one. That one is kind of a good precursor to this movie, because I've actually seen Jaws classified as a nature horror movie or something like that. It's called like nature horror, which I saw that and I was just like, oh, that's my genre, because that is both of the horrors that I think exist in the world: nature and actual horror movies. So just put those two together and it's perfect. So Grizzly Man is nature horror. It's just in documentary form. Now, Herzog says after Treadwell, I think it's towards the end of the film, and Treadwell has died, and there's footage of all the bears, and there's this beautiful close-up video that Treadwell took of the bear's eyes. And Herzog makes a distinction here where he says Treadwell looked at these bears and was able to see something so beautiful, so complex, so deep that he was able to empathize with. But Herzog says, I see none of that. When I look at this footage of the bear's eyes, I see nothing but, I think he says it's coldness and unthinkingness. And that's the same thing from Jaws. Jaws, I forget who it is that says it, but one of them, I think it's Quint, says that the shark has lifeless eyes. Lifeless
doll eyes. I think he said black doll eyes.
That's funny. Yeah, so you have both of these in the real world. Werner Herzog describing the bears as having these cold, apathetic eyes driven by nothing but instinct. There is no interest in humans. I think he says at best there's just this kind of passing acknowledgement of other beings. There's not this depth of relationship and communion that Treadwell seems to feel he had. And then in the movie Jaws, it's a lifeless shark. Or lifeless eyes of the shark.
It's that jump that a figure like Treadwell, which people who haven't seen that don't know what we're talking about. But so that's why that is a religious move by Treadwell to make the jump, the leap across species, the leap across into this alien world, the leap across and to see something. It's not humanity, you're right, and it's not reason, and it is, in one sense, what Herzog is saying, brutal, cold, unfeeling nature. But, it's a massive leap. But to be able to make that and to go across and to see something beyond that in grizzly bears, or to see something beautiful about sharks, to see something beautiful about apex predators, I understand why it's hard to do. And I'm not... Well, I mean, I did endorse neo-arctolatry in the other podcast, but I endorse a lot of things that I, it's questionable. I make claims. There is a religious move almost to be able to do that, to be able to establish friendly relationships between nations. In a way, that's what it is that Treadwell does. He lives amongst the grizzly bears. He crosses that line to his detriment. He's ultimately killed for it. But, that is what he does, doesn't it? I mean,
and that's, again, the two worlds, So we have here land and sea, but there's also the two worlds of civilization and nature, because these are different worlds. Civilization is an attempt to control and keep out nature in so many ways, whether it's just the simple idea of getting people to all agree on the rules, which is don't just kill your neighbor because you want their car or something. We're not one for oneself. In a civilization, everybody is acting in unison. And that is against nature, because in nature, you don't, unless it's part of your small group, anyone out there is an enemy immediately. You don't ask questions first. You meet a stranger in civilization, you don't immediately treat them like an enemy and you decide, well, I have to strike first before they strike me. We assume that everybody plays by the rules, and for the most part, they do. And so, of course, we medicine, houses, all these different things are just attempts to control and keep nature out. So civilization and nature are two different worlds entirely. The Grizzly Man podcast really goes in depth where we talk about that idea of nature as its own place, as its own world, and something we're so divorced from that it really isn't a jump to say it is another world that is foreign to us. But that's that interesting act for Treadwell to jump, to make that transition across worlds. And that's, again, the people that transition across worlds are very unique characters in any way they do it. Yes, exactly.
In
that's
some
what
ways,
it is.
aren't they?
That's what it is.
Well,
Well,
that's
think
the
about
idea anyway.
Think about the two worlds of the unconscious and the conscious. This is, again, the person that can go back and forth between these two worlds skillfully is also essentially a modern day shaman, because these are the artists. These are the people that go into the depths and bring something back for us. And anytime you cross into an unknown world, there is a risk that you don't come back. That's the danger of going into a foreign world that you are not at home at, whether it's nature, the depths of your unconscious, the dark side of yourself, or the sea, a land that is not a land, a foreign place. I really like
the land of water.
That's right, the land of water.
The slippery land of water.
I also saw the eyes of the shark and the eyes of the bear as really what they are the eyes of nature. This is what it would look like. It's what it would feel like to look into nature. If you could personify it in a being, it would have lifeless, apathetic, distant eyes. Wouldn't look at you the way a human does. And that's why we are scared of it, because it's apathetic to us.
Some people in the past have called me Grizzly Blair. I'm not sure if we covered that on the podcast.
We
in particular, when I wake up, if I have to be woken up,
you have lifeless eyes.
I have the lifeless, cold, brutal eyes of nature. You know, when I'm woken up from my hibernation.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the thing.
Look,
I mean, you look into these eyes, and this is why I think an animal is so scary, like a bear or a shark. It's because you can't reason with it. And there's
you can't reason with any animals. The reason you're afraid of you can't reason with a salamander, but you're not afraid of it because it's not going to eat you.
No, but
yeah, you reason with salamanders on a regular basis?
No, but there are animals that think more, that have higher cognitive abilities,
and there are domesticated animals that you reason with in the sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like you can look at certain animals are more in tune with human beings, and I mean, of course, you're not per se reasoning with them, but you are able to communicate with them, and that's a really interesting thing there. That
you can communicate with sharks.
No, you fucking can't communicate with sharks. What communication are you going to do with a shark?
I believe. Okay, so there's a lot of shark missing. I actually want to take a moment here to say something that I believe about this movie that is important to say, and that is, sharks aren't going to fucking kill you, morons. If sharks are going to eat you while you're No,
Everybody
do we though? Because a bunch of people got scared. A bunch of people got scared from this movie.
In 1975,
the fear persists.
The campaign has been launched already.
Fine. You don't want me to give you a public service announcement about not to be afraid of Jaws? And fine.
Keep
on
your
letting the
PETA
Jaws
spiel.
Dude, there's 100 million sharks slaughtered a year.
Not because we're scared of them.
No, not because we're scared of them. So that's a separate issue that we're not going to go into. But stop eating shark fin.
Eating sharks.
It's not a good idea.
Do it. It's not us.
If you want to eat a shark, fine. Eat a shark. Don't harvest a shark, cut its fin off, and throw its finless body in the ocean because you want its fin. That's grotesque and wasteful, and I condemn it.
I condemn it too. I condemn wastefulness.
And I condemn that regardless of the culinary tradition of the culture, because there's a lot of waste and abuse in Western
Well, people
culinary
like to make exemptions, particularly in the West, for other cultures, traditional forms of being. But it's like, how far are you willing to go for that? There's other cultures. Well, there used to be foot binding in China. Should we defend that as a cultural practice? That's just, we're being so ethnocentric to say that maybe that's not a great. I'm not saying go in there and arrest everyone and enforce a different value on them, but I'm not going to sit here like a damn clown and say it's just a different culture. Like, it's clearly harmful. So there are practices that are harmful, and we can be objective about that because we do need to get to a place as human beings living on a planet where we're not like, oh, those people on the other side, well, they just have a completely different way of existing. They're humans, aren't they? They live in a society with a language. They're pretty advanced. They use phones and technology like you do, right? So, I mean, we should probably all try to unify as a one species instead of treating each other like weird foreigners. Even in our own country, people do this where it's like, oh, you know,
we shouldn't do it.
White people cannot understand the experience of the Latinx. Like, am I a fucking alien or something? Like, that's ridiculous. If that's true, then we have a big problem. So I think I'm very against this idea that you cannot comment on anything that exists in another culture. I hope that's not true, because if that is, we are in for a lot of problems because we're never going to be unified as a species and get anywhere.
So I think that, okay, so briefly, yeah, from my understanding, shark fin soup is an Asian thing, and particularly China.
Yeah, we're not eating that here.
Does a lot of, right, that's just obvious. I'm against it. I think it's a bad idea because of they're just killing a bunch of sharks, which
they
are
throw them
necessary
away
for the
to the whole
ecosystem.
fucking shark.
They're not eating the shark. Okay, so that's a problem. Now, here's the thing. There are problems with the way we treat animals and do industrialized farming of animals in the West also. So I'm not in any way trying to say it's just the Chinese that are doing bad things. No. They do shitty things. Let's all just be clear about that. And we do also. And I'll give you an example just so that no one can accuse me of being against whatever, okay? So during the coronavirus thing, it was a terrible story. I hate to even relate to this story. But everyone freaked out, and so they closed down the factories of pig farms. Oh. And they made an economic decision. They said, well, we can keep feeding these pigs, or we can just slaughter them all now. And these idiots didn't want to spend the money or the time to slaughter them the way they normally would. And so what they did, and this is a fucking... They used steam to heat up the areas where the pigs were in to basically boil them alive slowly.
What the?
Because that was the most
economic,
efficient and the most cost-effective way to do it.
Oh.
So I'm in no way. Look, yeah.
Wait, where was that?
Somewhere in the fucking Midwest, some
my God.
corporate pig farm thing or whatever. They decided they needed to do it this way because it was cheaper, and so they essentially did. It's disgusting.
That shouldn't be allowed.
It shouldn't be allowed.
There's a we have to live at least of a standard where we're not needlessly cruel. I'd rather someone hunt and shoot an elk through the neck with an arrow than boil mass number of pigs alive. That's just grotesque.
Slowly.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's I mean, animals.
They fucked it up and they couldn't get the temperature.
Oh,
anyway,
God,
look,
that's
look,
too much.
So there's bad things. There are bad things, and the Western world does this also with animals.
And there's also the thing with the weasels or the minks. What was it in Norway or something?
Yeah. I don't want to go into all.
Wrong.
We could sit here for an hour.
Everyone has problems. It's not that only X people or culture are at fault of this. It's the principle of the matter entirely, and this is what people seem to really struggle with today, is the idea of applying a principle as a principle, which means it doesn't only apply to you or the groups you don't like or the groups you do like. It is a principle, meaning you apply it across the board always. It's not like, again, it's the thing of lying. You don't, I'm truthful sometimes. Well, then you're not truthful, period. It's a principle. The idea of being honest is a principle. The idea of treating other beings with compassion is a principle. So I think,
the reason people are worried when you point out something about a different culture and you say that's bad or that's not good. The reason people worry, and it's understandable, is that they're afraid that people will hear that and say, oh, the Chinese or whatever or whoever are alien and bad, and they don't ever think about what their own culture does that is bad, and they just automatically other all this massive people, and I understand why that's a problem. Yeah. But we have to have a more full conversation, and it's necessary to have that other component of we also. The West certainly has a lot of problems with its culinary tradition. Now, anyway, sorry, I went into this spiel about this, but that actually bothered me a lot. That pig story bothered me a lot.
That's bad. Yeah.
It's bothered me for months, and so has
pigs are smart animals too. They're not like, sorry fish, but I don't want to hurt fish either, but pigs really are like smarter than dogs.
Well, hey, look, I eat fish. Look, I'm not trying to I'm not yelling at everyone to become vegan or do whatever. You eat what you want to eat. It's not about that. It's about don't be needlessly cruel.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Even if it's for money, it shouldn't be done. That's all. You eat whatever you want to eat. It's not my fucking.
People need to be ethical, and this is the thing. You can't. No one's here going to tell you exactly how to be ethical, because in a way, that's not really ethical, is it? You know, that's a little. It depends how you go there.
No.
Well, I'm not going to demand other people follow my ethics.
You can't demand it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I can't force anyone to do it. I can tell you what I think is ethical for sure, and stand by my own ethics. But I can't force someone to follow my ethics, because then that's not my ethics anymore. I mean, of course, I would. If someone was trying to kill someone in front of me, I would hope that I would try to stop them, and I wouldn't just be like, "Well, my ethics don't allow that," but do you? That would also be one of my ethics, though, which is don't allow for harm to happen when you're there. So whatever. Don't mess with the sharks is essentially what we're trying to say. Are you done with your shark thing?
Yeah, well, so okay, no, I'm not. But the other aspect of it is that so sharks aren't going to eat you. Most likely is a shark. There's a few people every year or whatever, they get eaten by a shark or get bitten by a shark. So yeah, it happens. But if sharks were going to eat you, then clearly, if every time everyone gathered on a beach, there would just be sharks swimming in from the ocean and eating everybody in the ocean. So everybody knows that. Now I know this to be a fact. Most people know this to be a fact. I understand that. But I swim in the ocean quite a bit, and I swim out relatively far into the ocean. There is and anyone who's swam in the ocean out beyond the area you normally swim in will know this feeling. There's this feeling sometimes when you don't know what's underneath of you anymore, and you're out there, and it's a unique fear of not knowing, because you can't really see either what's down there. So even though I know I'm not going to get eaten by a shark, logically, like every time I go out into the ocean, it crosses my mind. Like when you go out and you swim a little bit, it crosses my mind, and I know the shark's not going to eat me, but like it crosses my mind.
It's the unknown. I think it's super interesting.
I think of it in terms of a shark, though, because I don't think of a
specifically
giant
shark. Well, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, because I don't know what else is going to really, like, dolphins aren't going to.
Stingrays will get you.
Yeah, but I mean,
they got someone.
Yeah, they get people, but it's not somehow as scary. Like, that sucks to get stung and then die of poison.
But yeah, shark would be the end. You
I don't
get
think
out of that one.
stingrays. They get your feet, I think, and your legs, right? Like, they don't just run up on you and sting you. That's if you step on them, more or less.
Mostly, yeah, I believe
so don't do that.
It's a defense. They don't hunt you, that's the thing. But yeah, no, I have felt the same thing where I'm in a place like swimming or whatever, and there's nothing underneath you. And what really bothers me is when I can't see the bottom. When I can't see the bottom of where I'm swimming and I can't reach the bottom, I don't like it at all. I don't like that at all. I have been swimming in parts of the ocean where you can see straight to the bottom. And this is like out in the ocean where you need a boat to get there. And it's deep. I don't remember how deep it was, but it was very deep where I don't think I could swim to the bottom and get back up with breath. Like it was deep enough. And I could see straight down to the bottom, from the top to the bottom, to the floor of the ocean. The water was so clear. I had no problem swimming in that. No problem. It's not about the depth. It's about the fact that you can't see what's underneath you there. I mean, it's creepy. It's creepy.
Jaws sees you. You don't see Jaws.
Exactly. And you don't know what's there. You know what really bothers me? I've been in the ocean, too, where there's that the seaweed. Ugh, I hate that shit. Like this. No, I mean seaweed that grows up from the bottom, not the stuff that just floats. Like there's this kind of seaweed that's just all over. Like, I don't know if it's called seaweed, but it's whatever these plants are, and they're slimy. They're super nasty. And if you're in that area, you're just like, your feet are touching these like slimy tendrils. Yeah. I don't like that at all. And who knows what's hiding out in those things? There's things hanging out in there. The ocean is an unknown. It's an unknown place.
Swamp thing.
And we like to... What thing?
Swamp thing.
Oh, swamp. I mean, Who knows? Maybe it's a tiny Swamp Thing. Couldn't
It's
be.
not
It
in
doesn't
the
have to be a
swamp.
monster.
I mean, Swamp
Just a
Thing
little-
wouldn't be in the ocean.
That's
Swamp
true.
Thing maybe visits the ocean sometimes. Okay,
Goes to
let's
the
move
beach.
on. Swamp
Okay,
Thing?
yeah.
Oh, why can't Swamp Thing go to the beach? I don't know much about Swamp Thing. We need to learn more.
Let's go on to the we're going to talk about the corruption in this town because we got to talk about the corruption in this town. Okay, the other part of this movie that's important, you can't ignore it, is the role of civilization and society, and particularly a corrupted society, a corrupted a kind of bureaucracy within the civilization. It's a cool thing because they did it in a small town, so you're kind of fooled into thinking, oh, it's just a small town, it's just the mayor, whatever. But there is that figure of power that chooses their own, saving themselves. And again, in a way, they're both doing that. The mayor wants to save himself, and Brody also is kind of just looking out for him and his own family. And these interests that only think about oneself are what damage the civilization as a whole. They make it less safe for people, for the general public. And so, but what's really the main takeaway from the role that a corrupted civilization plays in this movie is that it's specifically Brody that restores order and preserves the civilization by facing his fear and being willing to stand alone against that threat to civilization, which is the shark. So it's not Hooper, it's not Hooper, and it's not Quint. They're parts of that process, but it's Brody was both the vector of a threat to society in turning the other way and just kind of going with the flow and letting the bureaucracy pressure him into going one way or the other. And it's also him that it falls to defend that society. And I really like that theme there, because I think it's something that people can totally take to everyday life, which is don't look for the fucking mayor to solve your problems. He's busy trying to stay being the mayor. Don't look for the elites and the educated, the Ivy Leagues to solve your problems either. Don't blame the old, weird, rough, rural guy sitting in his decrepit boat either. It's you. It's the person that knows all these things are a problem and knows there's something that should be done about it, but doesn't do it. That's the biggest threat to a civilization, is not taking up your own role in preserving it. And that's what Brody does. That's how the movie is. That's how it ends. He faces the threat.
Which is in the horror writing genre and discussions around that, it's an interesting idea, because you think of this as a horror movie. There's a criticism that horror is conservative by nature in a weird way. And so I can see that reflected in this film, because you have as you said, the common man and also the police officer who restores order, so you can see that as a theme that is, anyway, that's a topic that I don't necessarily take a position on, believe or disbelieve, but it is something in the conversation in terms of writing and reading horror stories. There's this idea that there's something intrinsically conservative about it, because it's always, which, I'm not super familiar with the argument, but probably has to do a bit with there's the other, which is often the monster, and then there's this the force of the common man or hero. Because I think in horror films it is oftentimes kind of just the common person that struggles against that, and then
not a superhero.
Right. So
it's a superhero movie.
Small note on horror writing.
Yeah, I think there's also the way I interpret that is that often horror is chaos. Horror is what happens when something has gone out of whack. Something's not functioning as it should be. And that's a threat to order, which is civilization. Civilization is when things are in order and we've all agreed to act a certain way, and we try to keep nature out. And nature is chaos as hell. Like, that is chaos. I would not argue. I know there's the idea that the universe is ordered and whatever, but I don't see nature as being order. On the contrary, nature is unpredictable, nature is unreasonable, as we've discussed.
The ultimate reason.
I hate it. Anyway, so there's another way you can interpret the role of civilization in Jaws, and it comes from literary critic and Marxist theorist Frederick Jameson. So I give him credit for this view because it's very specific and it's interesting. But even though it's an older one, I mean, I think he didn't write this recently. Basically, he says that you can view Quint's demise as like a symbol of overthrowing an old populist America. But Brody and Hooper partner together, and this is an alliance between law and order, he's a cop, and between this new technocracy and the elite, because here Hooper is this urban, educated, wealthy, tech-driven personality. But what makes this interesting is these two forces join together, and the viewer is rejoicing at this partnership to overthrow to the old populist that Quint symbolizes. Quint is lost to the shark, but they come together to restore order to society, essentially. But it's the viewer that is excluded from this. So it's kind of this idea that you have these two powers joining together, and though the viewer is cheering this on, you're actually on the outside of it. You're the more common man in that analysis. I think it's kind of an interesting way. It's not my view. That's why I wanted to give the specific credit to this person's theory of that. But it did remind me of when you have these social media companies that are very clearly liberal. Like, they are not conservative, they're not led by conservatives. And they, of course, the idea is they're supposed to be non-biased, but I think it's very clear at this point that they have no qualms about making what side of the aisle of politics they reside on quite clear. And you have government, both sides, whether it's the right or the left in government, vying to take control of this power, because obviously social media at this point is a massive influence upon the population. You control the voice of the population, and you control the means of influencing that population, and you control the population. So here you have these the cultural elites. I mean, the tech companies, the wealthy innovators in society joining with the corrupt, power-vying government people. And where does that leave us? The viewer cheering and saying, "Yay, they took off that person I don't like." Are we the fools in that scenario? It's an interesting analysis to get from Jaws.
It is. What I would say is that from a personal view, I think we can just put this on our YouTube clips, and I'll just say a personal view from Justin A.W. Blair. What I would say is that I didn't cheer when the shark got killed. I don't know. I guess it's just my contrarian nature that I didn't rejoice when the shark was killed. And it's not just because I love sharks. People are going to be like, "Oh, the shark lover loves sharks. He doesn't like shark fin soup, and he doesn't like bacon or whatever." Fuck off. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that that I just didn't. I guess ultimately I just wanted to see Jaws go on its way, and
Well, he wouldn't go on his way. That's the problem. Jaws was crazy. Jaws was crazy. I'm not. My recording stopped. Yeah. If you have something, do you want to start?
Sure.
Because you were kind of the last one speaking, so maybe you should start.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, as I was saying, my beard is a symbol of nature, and it is also a talisman against Jaws. So when I go swim in the ocean, Jaws looks at my beard and is like, "You are nature. Your beard is the ultimate reason. I will not attack you. And I agree with Jaws, and I nod to Jaws, and then Jaws swims off and does Jaws things, and I swim.
Jaws things.
That's what I was trying to
No.
get at.
No. I think you're pulling a treadmill. You're pulling a fucking treadmill.
I walk
You're
the line.
seeing
I walk
things
the
in the
border.
shark.
Yeah, I walk the border.
Oh yeah. That I don't see anything in the shark's eyes, in those doll eyes.
But the
I think that's
shark's
so
dull
funny.
eyes see something in me.
Is it doll or
Dull. The dull eyes.
I thought you said the Quint says they're doll.
I thought he died. That's so funny. Maybe he says
okay,
dull.
That's what I thought you said.
I thought he says doll eyes.
I hope
Like,
he does
because
say
dolls
doll
have
eyes.
lifeless eyes also. Dolls scare me.
Yeah.
We've talked about
Dolls
how puppets
actually-
and dolls are frightening to me.
Dolls
right?
are nature. No.
No. If
No, they're not.
now look, if
They're just lifeless. But they're actually lifeless. That's why it's fine for dolls to have doll eyes. And when you got an animal that can cause harm to you and it has doll eyes, you got a problem.
But the shark, you just don't understand the shark eyes. That's all I'm trying to say. You
Well, it's impossible to
land
understand
lubbers
them.
don't understand the grizzly eyes and the shark eyes, and I get it. I don't, look.
You don't
I'm
either.
not trying to say I'm a shark shaman. All I'm trying to say,
not.
well, I haven't been eaten by a shark. You know what would be tragic is if we did this podcast and then I went swimming and I got eaten by a shark, and it would be like, that's
Would it
the
be tragic?
weird. Well, thanks. I
Well,
think
no.
it would,
I mean,
wouldn't it?
that
I
part-
mean, there would be no more word of the podcast. Number one.
That's true. That would be tragic. But I mean, like, it would be very
Hello?
grizzly man. Shark
Well,
man.
I don't want to be grizzly man. I mean, and I'm not.
All right, then admit that the shark has lifeless
Listen.
doll eyes.
Stop acting like a fucking cop interrogating me about nature trying to restore order. I'm simply saying that perhaps you're not, that you're just anthrocentric. Is that a word? It should be a word. Your
It
anthrocentricism
probably is.
is looking at the shark and saying, "Oh, you're lifeless, you're dead, whatever, stupid nature
That's
shark."
what I say.
And it's like,
Stupid
no, you just
shark.
don't understand. You just don't understand. They have 400
You
million
cannot.
years of fucking
You cannot
shark.
understand. I respect that I
know
cannot
that-
understand
okay,
them though.
Fine, yeah, that's all I ask. Know that you can't understand it. That it is a limitation of your human reason to
Yeah.
understand that. Correctly so. I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
anyone go swim with sharks and try to pet them. It's like I never suggest anyone go out and hang out with grizzly bears and try to give grizzly bears hugs. I'm not saying that's a great idea. I'm just saying maybe there's a middle ground here where we can say they're not just lifeless killers. In a way they are. I understand they are in a way. But, that's how sharks look. 400
That's
million
the
years can't be
shit.
wrong. I don't know. That's another
Well-
scientific. We throw out a lot of facts about nature that are not facts. I think sharks have been around
I won't say that they're
400
facts
million
that are
years.
not
That can't be
facts.
right. That's 500 million fucking years. Is that real? Sharks? All right, I'll do a research.
Look it up.
Yeah, tell
Anyway,
me
in
about
the
how
meantime-
we need to restore order and
No, I will tell you about the shark as a symbol of the inner darkness that every person must deal with.
sharks are
We
older
have
than
to-
trees. All right.
I think I already said that in a less scientific way because I told you that the oceans were here
Yes.
first,
Yes, we
essentially.
know that.
And the sharks were here first. Everything that is existing, the oceans were before that.
Well, there was
Everything
land.
came out of the fucking ocean.
I think there was land for him.
Well, not really, okay? If you go far enough back, land was just like these, like, I just imagine far enough back and it's just these pools of weird liquid.
But that's a
all over the
long,
place.
long time
Like,
ago. I mean, but
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
all I have to say is sharks are older than trees. Trees also have lifeless eyes. I understand people
That's
can't look
right.
into the trees and see their soul. I understand that. I'm just
Well,
saying
trees don't kill you. They don't hunt
trees
you.
kill people. I bet trees kill
All
more.
the time.
Trees kill more people than sharks. I bet if you look, I'm going to make a claim. This is the claim of the podcast. I'm going to have a word of the podcast. I'm going to have a claim of the podcast. I'm going to have all kinds of segments. Okay, my claim of the podcast is that trees kill more people per annum than sharks. I don't know if it's true.
Yes.
Fact check
okay.
me. I don't care.
But is it of their own volition or is it through the
You don't
application
know.
of another force?
You don't know the mind of the tree. The trees could.
Well,
the tree.
the mind.
Storms happen. You don't know anything about storms and their minds. Oh, yeah, look, it's a lot of speculation. All I wanted to say,
You're off the chain for sure. 400 million years.
450
No,
million
you
years.
don't.
Older than trees. Think about that. Sharks didn't even know trees weren't even born when sharks were born.
Can you imagine being like, I'm been around for more than trees? Like, how would you relate to trees? Because we look at trees and we're like, this tree is 200 years old. It's so old. But what if your species has been around for longer than trees? Trees are like losers to you. It's like, look at these baby items. Like, oh, I'm a tree. I'm going to grow out of the ground. Like, lame. You know, you're an old being lurking around the oldest part of the earth. Trees are like fake. Trees are fake news.
Trees are fake news to sharks. I think that you can't, yeah.
Trees are less real than sharks. That's what that means. Trees are less real than sharks. And we look at trees all the time. There's a bunch of trees all over here. No sharks.
Yeah.
Trees are submissive to sharks.
Well, sharks and trees don't deal with each other much.
No.
Sharks don't even probably see trees very often.
Trees escape.
But trees see the sharks. They're taller. A lot of speculation. Sorry. Anyway, what is the inner...
Okay. Shark as a symbol of inner darkness. Mm-hmm. Look, the thing is, all these characters in the film, they all have to face the shark. You know, Brody has to get out on the water and face a danger. He has to face a threat. Hooper, the younger character, has to face his own naivety, his own arrogance, because he thought that cage was going to hold and I'm going to do this, and I got this, and I know sharks. He almost died. And that's how you get humbled. That's what I think is one of the interesting lessons from analyzing the character of Hooper, is seeing what it looks like to have the arrogant naivety of youth. Is you're cruising for a shark bruising is what it is, because that's what brings you down. You end up having something happens to you in life, hopefully not very bad. Hopefully you don't get eaten by the shark. Hopefully you just get a little jarred by the shark. But you come out of that experience and you are a new person. You are humbled and you have a newfound respect for civilization too. That's usually what happens, is you come out of the ocean, you're like, you know what? A little corruption in society isn't the worst thing. I almost got eaten by a shark. And, you know, you don't want to go too far with that, because then you end up with the character of Quint, which is this kind of... The
character I related to the most, apparently.
Yeah.
The emotionally insane sailor man who suicides himself to shark. Probably not the best character to relate to. I mean, really, I'm making a case.
He's in a way the most likable character.
He is.
Yeah, I relate to him too, in a way.
We all relate to all the characters.
I mean, we all. Yeah, exactly.
I relate to Jaws. You don't. That's fine.
No, I don't relate to Jaws.
You should.
Look, okay,
that's another claim. I don't know if you should relate to Jaws. Sorry.
We'll get
there.
Go ahead. The thing is, you can relate to Jaws if you look at Jaws not as a shark the way you do. I don't relate to him as a shark, but I do relate to Jaws in the way that Quint's character relates to Jaws, which is, I respect this monster. You know? So what I really like about, what I love about Quint and the shark is that this is the perfect example for what it looks like to come to terms with your own demons. Now, Quint is almost like a kind of Odysseus figure at first. He's about to get the shark, and the first time the shark bites on the line, he has to strap himself in so as not to be pulled into the depths with the monster. And this is a real thing. I know that when you're fishing those type of, not sharks per se, but really strong like marine animals, you use a strap-in chair so that you can, you don't get pulled into the water, because you can't fight with something that's that strong. But it's also just like, I saw this and it immediately conjured the imagery of like Odysseus having himself tied to the mast when passing the sirens. And that's the pull of your own darkness, is that, yes, you have to go fishing for that monster. You have to face that monster. But you can't be pulled in. There is a way to go too far in pursuing the monster, in fighting your demons. And if you go too far in your pursuit of your inner darkness, you become consumed by those demons. And Quint is literally consumed by his demons because he's obsessed with the shark. And the shark was to him, it was the battle he lost. The shark took so much from him, from his own sense of stability in the world to his own friends in the crew. And so he been gunning for that shark for a long time, and then he became a shark hunter or whatever, shark fisherman after his experience with the sharks in the when the boat got blown up or whatever. So he becomes obsessed with the shark and ultimately becomes consumed by his demons. But what I love about his character is his relationship to the shark. It's not one of pure hatred. You have anything to comment on that?
No, I don't. I agree.
Oh.
It is a clear fact that he's been spending the last 20 some odd years as hunting sharks. And then he's faced with this, the ultimate shark that ends his life.
Yeah. I mean, he essentially it is a very much a Captain Ahab figure that becomes obsessed with his own demons. He's plagued by it, and he pursues it ultimately to his detriment. He dies pursuing the biggest battle that he can find. And there's something honorable in that. We don't pity his character.
No, you don't. But the problem I have with it is that he brings other people into it. So in Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, I believe it's just a lone fisherman off the coast of Cuba or off the coast of Florida or something, that it's him versus, I don't know what it was, a marlin or something. It's a long time ago since I read it. But it's just his fight. He doesn't drag other people into it. Moby Dick, which is one of the books that I tried to read twice, and I have finished 2/3 of it both times in my life, and then I quit. It's something I bet you it's not uncommon for people that have tried to read that book. But anyway, I admit to that publicly, to my shame. He's on a ship, and he's responsible for other people. So that's the problem I have. If you want to wreck your own ship and go face to face with Jaws to your own possible demise, that I accept, and it's fine. I think that's okay. But you shouldn't drag other people into it. You shouldn't sell tickets to your boat that you're gonna wreck the boat. That's all. It's like, hey, pay me $10,000, get on this boat, and then I'm gonna destroy it and have a crazy face off.
Leave you out there on the wreck.
Yeah, that's a little bit. That's where me and Quint don't.
But here's the thing: it depends how you interpret it. So if you look at Quint and you try to make an ethical interpretation of him as a person, yes, that's what you come up with. But if you look at Quint instead as a kind of aspect of like the wise man figure, that's what happens. You join the journey, and he leaves you at one point in the journey when you need him most. And you have to step up at that point. There is no one that can rescue you. And you can't go back. So it's actually a pretty common situation there where the mentor, the wise figure, the one that could save you and he was the one. You remember when there's a part in the movie where Brody ties the rope wrong, and he ties it across Hooper, and Hooper gets stuck with the rope, and it's Quint that says, give him space, and to call out attention, and you have to do this, tie this, take this off, and he's doing all these things. He saves them on many, many occasions.
And they signed up for it, whatever. You know what? That's fine. I absolve Quint of his guilt too.
Ethically, of course, you wouldn't do that if you're like, I know I'm going to kill myself, and I'm going to take these people.
And I don't
but
think
as the wise man figure, Yeah, as the wise man figure, that is exactly what you would do. You say, you're coming on the journey, you're going to finish it alone. And that's how they come back at the end and this is the good, really satisfying part that ties back in the analysis of masculinity and the rite of passage for men going off and doing these things like this, is that those are going to be the best men that come back now. First of all, you had Brody being like this, watch out with the drawer, and like, you know, kind of always timid, and he was not a weak character by any means, but he will come back now as a better part of society, as a better member of society that would not have made that first mistake, to bow his head and to allow society to influence him in the direction that caused harm to someone else. He's going to come back as a person that can face up to challenges, and he'll be a better father and a better husband and a better citizen for it. And Hooper too will come back now humbled and not with that naive arrogance and a respect for the shark, not a kind of childish fascination with it, but a true respect for it. And he's going to be a real relaxed person when he comes back. He's going to lose all that type of arrogance, because that's that integration of the personality and those humbling challenges that force you to leave behind, you know, in a way, the characters, a person, when you linger too long in a certain stage of life, you become nasty. You become like this, like it's an animal that's living in a space that's too small for it. So it gets a little cagey. It's not right. Something's off with it. It needs to move to the next stage. And if you don't do that, you're like this animal that's living in a space that's too tight. Yeah, you feel very comfortable there, and you're the big dog in that area, but you're still living in a tiny hole in the ground. You know, you've got to get out and go face the bigger challenges, and then you become the next level. You raise up on that hierarchy in society, or just within your own self. Your personality grows because you don't get stuck in that one section of your personality, which is like, I know so much, or I'm safe and good. I'm a good member of society. You move forward and you discover new parts of the personality and you integrate them. So Quint is the example for how to treat your inner demons, your monsters, which is not with an obsessive, passionate fascination or an arrogance, not with fear and apprehension, but with healthy respect and with full knowledge that it can always kill you. Like, he was consumed by the monster. And that is, I think, the perfect example of how you deal with your own inner depths, your own shark.
So the question I asked myself is, in hand-to-hand combat, who would win, me or Jaws?
I don't know why you would even ask
That's the question of the podcast. Do you have an answer?
We have another segment, the question of the
podcast.
Yes,
I forgot. I want to bring it. My question of the
Jaws doesn't have any hands, so that's...
You got
did I
it.
ruin your
you ruined the fucking punchline. God damn it. Good job, though. You know what? You win. You win the riddle.
I did. Bye, y'all.